Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have. What's up, everybody? Didn't mean to have two of us up there. How's everybody doing tonight? It is Saturday night here where I'm at, but I know you guys are all over the place, and I appreciate you joining me here and spending some time with us tonight as we talk about Alec Baldwin and this Rust shooting case yet again. It is back in the news because ABC Action News has gotten their hands on an FBI report. I haven't seen the report. If anybody has it, follow me on Instagram and Twitter right here at Tragos Law. Send it over to me and we'll break it down. But they have given us some insight as to what is in that report. And as we look into some of those details, it will be very interesting. And we're not here to convict Alec Baldwin. We're not here to make any conclusory statements or anything like that. But what we are here to do is to discuss and continue to discuss things we've discussed in other episodes and other videos, which is Alec Baldwin went on to ABC, gave this interview, made a lot of statements, was just unequivocal about it, and he made statements that are factual, that can be proven or disproven. They were not vague. They were very specific. And we said, just wait till we hear more evidence. Now there's a lot of things people can point to and say, that's not true. That's not true. I have evidence that that's not true. He explained processes that he's probably not an expert in. We talked about what it would look like when we got some expert testimony on it. We even had some potential gun experts come on our channel and talk about this and whether or not how Alec Baldwin explained it is even possible. So we're going to talk about all that and more tonight. If you haven't already, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe to our page. Alec Baldwin, we have a full playlist of 15 or 20 videos on this Rust shooting case, the surrounding lawsuits, the criminal investigation. And we're going to talk about all those different avenues and legal angles tonight and more. We'll talk criminal case. We'll talk civil case. We'll talk Alec Baldwin. We'll talk experts. So it's going to be an interesting show. And we're going to start by reminding you that on ABC, in an interview with George Stephanopoulos, is that how you say his name? I should know that since I'm Greek, but I always just call him George Steffi, where Alec Baldwin said, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger. He was very clear about that. Yet, who got their hands on this FBI report? Also, ABC, Action News. And after I like this one, Sean. Peter with the hat backwards is the lawyer, you bro. Thank you, Angela. So ABC Action News now has broken this report from the FBI, and they've reached out to Alec Baldwin to see if he has a comment, and guess what? He doesn't. Now he doesn't. So let's take a look at this report by ABC. We will take some questions after we read this report, and we'll take some questions after I play a little clip of a video. There'll be a couple different opportunities for questions tonight. But okay, here we go. Where's the top of it? All right, there's Georgie. And there's the interview, okay? We did an entire breakdown, 2 parts of this very long interview. If you want to check that out, check out our channel. The gun used in the fatal shooting on the Rust movie set could not have been fired without pulling the trigger, according to an FBI forensic report obtained Friday by ABC News. So that tells you right off the bat that some of the factual statements and even expert statements about the process of how a gun may fire and how he's holding it in his hand and exactly what he did. I did this. I pulled it back once. Then I pulled it back again and boom, it just went off. My finger was not on the trigger. Yet, FBI report says that's impossible. Let's find out how. Actor Alec Baldwin shot cinematographer Halyna Hutchins on the set of the Western, which he was producing and starring in last year. This is a little factual background for us. The actor believed he was handling a cold gun, one without live ammunition, when it went off and a live bullet struck Hutchins, killing her. The film's director, Joel Souza, was also wounded in the shooting. Accidental discharge testing determined that the firearm used in the shooting, a 45 long Colt Pietta single action revolver, could not have fired without the trigger being pulled, the FBI report says. So they did testing. They tried to fire this weapon without pulling the trigger, and it was impossible. I read some other reports and some other quotes that said they tried it every which way, and it couldn't be done. Even fiddling with the hammer, like exactly as Alec Baldwin explained it, even fiddling with that hammer, there's no way this gun fires and a live round comes out without pulling the trigger. With the hammer in the quarter and half-cocked positions, the gun could not be made to fire without pulling the trigger. So they did it in the quarter cock. They did it in the half cock. They tested it. Now, an interesting point to this is we talk about experts, right? There are different kinds of experts. Certain experts just know certain things. They understand certain things. And other experts test certain things in order to find an answer. Trial and error sometimes. So this is not necessarily, according to the FBI report, something that you can just know. And we'll circle back to that when we look at our gun experts that not our gun experts. We've never used them as experts. They have their armors and they have gun stores in our area and all around the state. Mad Dog Armory is what it's called. And we'll look at what they said and get into that explanation a little bit more here. But it's interesting. This wasn't just something they asked a gun expert and a gun expert says it's impossible because there's a lot of variables. So they decided to actually do the testing as the FBI, and they came back with it is impossible to be true, what Alec Baldwin said. And he has said this on national TV with everybody watching. With the hammer fully cocked, the gun could not be made to fire without a pull of the trigger while the working internal components were intact and functional. Now, that is our first qualification from the FBI report. So at first, they say it can't happen. And we don't have the actual report, so I don't know which order or context. But when I read this now as a lawyer, I hear you saying it could not be made to fire while the working internal components were intact and functional. So if I'm Alec Baldwin, I say, well, there you go. The working internal components must not have been intact and functional. So that's our first qualification. At first, it seemed like it is impossible. The gun could not be made to fire. The very first statement here. Could not have been fired without pulling the trigger. So they left those qualifications out. With the first two statements. With the hammer decocked on a loaded chamber, the gun was able to detonate a primer without a pull of the trigger when the hammer was struck directly, which is normal for this type of revolver. So, a little more expert opinion here. With the hammer decocked on a loaded chamber, the gun was able to detonate a primer without the pull of a trigger when the hammer was struck directly, which is normal for this type of gun. And again, I think that's pretty much in line with what our experts say. And again, they reiterate that in that interview, he said, I didn't pull the trigger. ABC News reached out to representatives for Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who is the armorer on that set, who was in charge of all weapons on the Rust set, but did not receive a response, which usually people think is bad. The forensic report is part of a criminal investigation into the on-set shooting. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, which is leading the homicide investigation, received the report and other FBI documents related to the shooting earlier this month. The Sheriff's Office said Thursday. So they have confirmed that the Sheriff's Office already had this report. And this is now talking about the criminal angle of the case. The documents have been reviewed by the New Mexico office of the medical examiner, which has classified Hutchins' death as an accident. A postmortem report was obtained by ABC News. The death, and this is from that report, the death was caused by a gunshot wound of the chest. Review of available law enforcement reports, so that means it could change, showed no compelling demonstration that the firearm was intentionally loaded with live ammunition on set. The report stated that based on all available information, including the absence of obvious intent to cause harm or death, the manner of death is best classified as an accident. The local district attorney has yet to make any charging decisions in the case. Detectives are awaiting phone records from Baldwin as part of their investigation, the sheriff's office said Thursday, which we know his phone is kind of a big part of this. So the question is, if it's already been ruled an accident, why isn't the homicide case closed? If they say there was no intent, why isn't the homicide case closed? Well, I do think that intentional homicide is out in this case. I think that it's going to be impossible for them to prove that Alec Baldwin, now, if somebody set him up and put, live rounds in the chamber when they shouldn't have been, things like that. But for Alec Baldwin, I think intentional homicide is out. I do not think they can prove it. However, negligent homicide and some sort of criminal negligence or even a reckless homicide has not been totally ruled out by the district attorney. So we have to see what other evidence may come forward from his phone, from other investigative reports that we may not have seen yet or have access to. So the criminal case is not over yet, as confirmed here by ABC Action News. So a criminal case could still be coming. And before we talk about a civil case, I'm going to answer some questions. Manslaughter is an accident, right? It can be, David. Anani, do you think Baldwin will be arrested? I do not at this point. I don't think he's going to be arrested. I think they're going to say it was a total accident. That's kind of where I'm leaning, but it's absolutely possible. I wouldn't say I'm like positive or 100% or 99%. This is barely more than 50-50 where my lean is that he won't be arrested. It wouldn't shock me at all if they did arrest him, but I'm going to guess right now that he is not going to be arrested for any criminal charges. Now, civil, totally different. Sarah Crane, I think the family will sue Baldwin for wrongful death. He should not have pointed it at anyone. Sarah, they have. And I actually broke down that lawsuit on my YouTube channel if you want to go check it out. And yes, love it. Is the victim's family suing? Yes, they are. Not just Alec Baldwin. A lot of other defendants in that lawsuit as well. It's pretty in-depth. So if you want an in-depth look at that lawsuit, go check it out on our channel. Mercedes McLaughlin, could others be charged besides Baldwin? Yes. And again, a lot of that is in the civil lawsuit, but definitely the armorer, definitely the assistant producer. I think his name was Hall or Halls, because he's the one who handed the gun to Alec Baldwin. There were a couple other people that handled the ammunition and handled the guns, even though they weren't supposed to. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, obviously the armorer, is in this situation as well. Peter thinks the armorer should be charged with negligent homicide. What about the cops who butchered that interrogation? So that's interesting too. Did you watch the interrogation? Tori asked. I have only seen clips of it. I haven't seen the whole thing. Is that something I need to check out? You guys let me know in the comments now if I need to do a full breakdown of that interrogation. I've seen clips of it, and it seems like they want to be buddies with Alec Baldwin, kind of, is what it seemed like to me. I don't think it was great, but that is something that comes into my analysis as to whether or not I think he's going to be charged. Explain how can be charged with anything. What about the death of Brandon Lee? It's unfortunate, but it's still an accident. I agree, but it is not dissimilar to cases like Potter, who pulled the gun, thought it was a taser, didn't mean to shoot him, but did shoot him. Okay. She didn't think that taser was going to fire a deathly shot, but it did. Same thing with Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, again, and a lot of this comes down to, did he pull the trigger or not? Because if he didn't even pull the trigger, then his actions could not have even ever thought to result in a deadly firing. It could also be like, somebody driving and they're speeding. They're speeding. They didn't plan on hitting the person crossing the road. They did hit the person crossing the road, and that person died. So they don't have that intent, but that accident does cause death, and usually does it rise to the level of needing criminal punishment is where the state attorneys make the determination as to who to file criminal charges against when we're talking about negligent homicides. Karen, why is his phone so important? Maybe he made some admissions or some cover-ups on his phone. We don't know. I read there wasn't an actual armorer. They were cutting corners. There was an armorer, but she had 5 other jobs. Her dad is actually a very famous armorer. There are all sorts of convoluted issues in this case. And again, we break them down in detail when we talk about a couple of the other lawsuits. Bev, what's your take here? Sabotaged by one of the disgruntled crew members who walked off the set just hours before the shooting. Someone wanted the film to fail and placed a live round in that dummy box of ammo. Well, then they must have hated and not cared if anybody on that set died, because there's no telling who would have actually been shot. And they really probably, if they were trying to get Alec Baldwin with this, it's very unlikely that this round would hit him, right? If it was going into his gun. I guess it could have been loaded into a different gun pointed at him. There's a lot of what ifs here, right, that we don't necessarily know. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the civil case. So as we know, criminal case, civil case, very different. Civil lawsuits going on right now. This is a huge piece of evidence in the civil case for these plaintiffs. If they can prove Alec Baldwin lied, that he had to have pulled the trigger, that's going to make him look bad if this case ever goes to a jury. Number 2, if they can prove that he went on national TV playing that police interrogation, convincing all these people that he's the good guy, crying, some people could call it phony if it actually was a lie. I didn't think it was phony necessarily. I thought he really did feel bad. I do think he was trying to go convince the world, which clients try to do this all the time, that they didn't do something. And in that attempt to convince, they actually start convincing people they did do something wrong. Even if they didn't, like in this case, he could have done absolutely nothing wrong. But I don't think that interview did him any help. I really don't think it did. I think it did him some harm. And I think now some of this testing is making him look even worse. So what does this FBI report mean for the civil case? This is the first kind of expert testimony we are seeing. And you as a civil plaintiff's lawyer, which is what I am, can use the FBI agents as a quasi-expert. Who did the testing? What did you do for the testing? What did you find out? We already know their report is consistent with what we think happened. And what better expert to put in front of a jury that a jury is going to trust and think they know how to handle weapons and they know how to do this stuff than FBI agents? A lot of experts in these kind of cases are ex-FBI agents. So what's one step better than that? Current FBI agents, because they know that they can't be bought and sold, and they're not experts that are just going to get paid to say whatever you want. So this is the first potential expert report that the plaintiffs can use. However, we know, if we watched the Johnny Depp case or heard me talk about cases, experts very commonly do not agree. And I am confident that Alec Baldwin and the other defendants are going to be able to find an expert that says it actually is possible to fire this weapon without pulling the trigger. One of the things that I haven't seen, because I haven't seen the FBI report and I didn't see it in any of the reports I searched online, is did they use the actual gun or did they use a replica of the gun? How old was the replica? Did they put any different features on it? Was it exactly the same? Was it in the same exact condition? Because all of that is important. So let's listen to just about a minute of one of our other videos where the experts from the Mad Dog Armory discuss just how it's possible with certain kind of guns, if you cock back the hammer, for them to fire without pulling the trigger.
So let's talk a little bit about the hammers and how they work.
When you're pulling the hammer back, you can see that the firing pin is on the hammer itself. If you were to be able to look inside, you'll see there's nothing blocking that. There's no recoil shield or anything, as there would be in a modern hammer fire gun.
Okay. So when we talk about these two different hammers, one's got the firing pin on the hammer, the other one does not.
It's internal, yes.
The older version of the Colt 45 that Alec Baldwin was using on the scene of the movie, which hammer would that look closer to?
It would have been incorporated with the hammer itself.
So it would have had the firing pin on it,
yes,
like we looked in this gun.
Yes, there's no safety, if you would call it that, in between that firing pin and that primer for that cartridge.
Depending on the age of the gun.
Right.
I just spoke with our gunsmith in Tampa, and he said it depends on the age of that particular firearm. So if it was an older type of gun, it would have that kind of hammer. But nowadays, they put precautions in place so that doesn't happen.
And from what we've learned, it sounds like this is a reproduction of a Colt Long 45, but it was built in the early 60s, and it had been a prop gun since the early 60s.
It most likely would have had none of the new precautions on it at all.
So most likely.
All right. So as you hear, thank you, Babette, for the super sticker. But as you're listening, another potential gun expert in a case like this, there are differing setups and makes of this gun, depending on the year, depending on the precautions that were in place, depending on the hammer, depending on the firing pin. So yes, a lot of people thought it was old, but maybe it was a replica to look old, right? That would make sense. Why do you have to have an actual old gun without all the precautions in it? Why can't you just make one that looks old, right? All of these things are going to become questions in this case. Somebody said Runkle had a good post on this. Yeah, he's like a gun guy. I'm not necessarily a gun guy. I mean, I don't know a lot about guns or anything like that, which is why we brought other people on the show who did or who do. Pete, my partner, knows a lot more about guns. But we talked a lot about this. And it really depends on which gun, how old, and how it was created and set up. Troy, what people are not talking about is there were apparently many other safety issues on set over the weeks. Others left due to safety concerns. There is a clear pattern of negligence. That's a big deal. Correct. And we've talked about this a ton on other videos. A ton. People being overworked and underpaid and having too many jobs and being tired and cutting corners and not necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing or listening to the processes and procedures they created and put in place for this movie. A lot of people are talking about that, and it's in the lawsuits. Deborah B., I think they need to do a forensic audit on the guy who handed Alec the weapon. Has he got Russian ties? Hit job on Russian military officer's daughter. Okay, I haven't heard that theory yet, but yes, and he actually has some other complaints. I think it's David Hulls or Hall, something like that. He has complaints in his past about cutting corners and not caring about safety issues and firing weapons on set, and there being other live rounds on set. Lots of issues in this case. Lots of safety issues, lots of gun safety issues in this case. But Alec Baldwin was hanging his hat on the fact that he did not pull the trigger. So he wasn't negligent, because from what he was told and what he was doing, he was told it was a cold gun, number one. But even if it was not a cold gun, He didn't do anything to make it fire. So there was another problem with the gun. Loriot, was the police interview not a true interrogation because he wasn't a suspect? I have to look again. I think it was a custodial interview. So it potentially was still subject to, I mean, obviously he could have pled the fifth. He could have gotten a lawyer at any time. But I think it was technically an interrogation. Yes. I have to look into it more though, because I'm not positive of the background. I've just seen clips on, in different articles and things like that. So I would say I don't know enough to answer this question 100% confidently. So, which I always will tell you guys when I've seen it, when I've read it, when I've dug into exactly, and that's why I really want to see the FBI report. We've looked through lots of FBI reports in our time. My dad does a ton of federal criminal defense. My first ever criminal defense trial was a federal trial. So I would love to look at the FBI actual forensic report on this. But we got to use what we have. iMac Mill. I read possible motive, maybe nuts. Victim was producing documentary as a side job, exposing child sex rings in Hollywood. Curious, true. So I have heard this one before. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. A lot of conspiracy theories here on this case. And this is one that I've heard a lot about, which this one actually wouldn't surprise me. If you think about like the Epstein stuff and, you know, all this fishy stuff that's happening and all the celebrities that are coming out with, you know, sexual crimes and things like that. Glenn, why focus on Baldwin? Who put a live round in the gun? Can I tell you why a lot of the focus on Baldwin, in my opinion, Glenn, and why we've done a lot of videos on Baldwin in this case? He decided to go on and do the interview. He decided to make statements that are easily proven or disproven. And now the FBI has just disproven one of his most important statements that he kept reiterating throughout the interview. So I would say he's putting the focus on himself here a little bit. He is also the defendant in multiple lawsuits. So, you know, we can only follow the breadcrumbs where they lead us, right? I don't just like choose somebody and put a target on them. There's a reason we do these videos. FBI report was about him. Interview was about him. Lawsuits, he was defending it. He was the one holding the gun. We haven't just talked about him. If you go watch the other videos, we've done a video on just Hannah Gutierrez Reed. We've done a video on all the defendants that were sued. We've done a video on the plaintiff and how that works with her family suing them and how a wrongful death action works. And we broke that down as well. So I think, you know, the focus is all over this case because it is a horrible situation, very sad. And I mean, I'm down to try to figure out if we can make this happen less on movie sets. And we've talked kind of globally and, you know, our moral thoughts about this and how our moral compass potentially feels about having shooting scenes in movies and for our enjoyment and things like that. Like if this really is possible, you know, do we want to kind of change how that's done? We have all this high tech stuff and graphics and things like that. Troy, iMac Mill. There are easier ways to take care of things or a person than such a complicated set of circumstances, etc. Makes no sense. I'm not sure. I didn't see iMac Mill's comment that this is responding to. Azam, what's up? Hi, Peter, off topic. Please shout out to my students in class 2, Sultan Muzaffar. Sultan Muzaffar. They are watching the channel with me now. What's up, Sultan? What's up, man? And Azam, thank you. Enjoy class. What class are you in? What are you learning about besides law? Chasing the horizon. Let's presume there's a guy walking down the street and his gun was given to him by a friend who said there's blanks in it, and he points it at another friend and the gun randomly shoots and kills. I don't think that's exactly what we have here, chasing the horizon, but I understand your sentiment, and absolutely. That's a problem. And that's what a lot of people are saying. What is his duty? What is the procedure? What was he taught? Was he not taught to check the gun himself? He said he wasn't. And that's another thing that's kind of, there are conflicting statements in the lawsuits. Was he told to check the gun? Was he not? Was he ever supposed to take the gun from anybody but Gutierrez Reed, or was he not? And because he went on and did this interview, we have his statement. Tori, I feel like sometimes accidents are accidents. After watching the interrogation and his response when he found out she died seemed so real. I agree with you. I definitely think his response did seem very real. It did not seem like he had any intent. I think he still would have the same response even if he pulled the trigger, though, and even if it really was just an accident. I don't think there's any intent. I don't think he wanted this to happen. I think he would have done anything he could to prevent it. But did he get lazy? Was he negligent in handling the gun? Did he break procedure? Did he break protocol? Did he break the processes they put in place? Kristen, if he doesn't speak, he's got something to hide. If he does talk, he's not remorseful in lying. What was the correct approach then? I never say if somebody doesn't speak, they've got something to hide. I think people that say that do not understand the system, do not understand how it works. It doesn't really do you any good to speak. It really doesn't. If you want to say something privately to the family or condolences or something like that, sure. But why go on national TV and do that interview? I mean, I think it was like saving face kind of. And he weighed the risks and rewards. And I just disagree with where he came out. Yeah, Stace said he kept talking and talking. Right. Yeah, people saying drunk drivers regret the deaths they cause. I mean, I think everybody that's involved in an accidental killing regrets lots of things they did that day, whether they could have prevented it or not. And that's the real question. Could he have prevented it? Louise, how did real bullets find their way in a box of blanks? So there's lots of different potential explanations. They were having multiple people deliver rounds. They did have people deliver live rounds. They shouldn't have. They mixed the live rounds with the blanks. But then they're saying, well, was it all in one box? How could there be live and blank rounds in a box? That's impossible. So there's a lot of shady stuff that went on, and it's going to be hard to determine who had control over that, who could have prevented that, who actually was in charge. I mean, there's a lot still that I think we're going to learn about this case. I think we're early on in these cases. Rio Owl, he showed more remorse than the officers who referred to her as the person involved, like they forgot her name. Shaking my head. Yeah, not great. Lauren asks, two things that should never mix are blanks and live rounds. Yeah, that seems like common sense, but that's tough. Tori, guys, I'm forever changed after being a member here. I can't look at a real life case on the TV the same again. I find myself saying, Peter says this and Peter says that. Anyone else? Not right all the time, okay? And a lot of times more information can help us make better decisions. So always give grace, and hopefully you receive it back if you, via me, are ever wrong when saying that to people. But it is fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff with you guys. Did Azam say what she's studying? I don't see it here. I probably missed it. All right, a couple more questions here. Yeah, Reese, that was Brandon Lee. Bruce Lee's son was also shot on set. Yeah, why have live rounds anyway? Destiny is all, Kristen. Why have live rounds anyways? Yeah, a lot of people say you should never have them on set, but it seems pretty clear multiple days there were mishaps with guns and live rounds. So doesn't look good. Really doesn't look good. I don't think there was already a settlement. Somebody just popped up that question. Someone is lying, Denise said. Wendy said, heard nobody handing the gun. It seems like everybody agrees that assistant director or producer David Hull handed him the gun. Why would we ever need live rounds? I agree with you. I hate to say that I would guess they probably think it looks better or sounds cooler. And we want it to be as realistic as possible for everybody that goes and sees this movie. And it's just tough. So Lauren S., I want you to go check out our video with Mad Dog Armory that I just posted, because we go into detail and we actually show you how live rounds and blanks look different. Yeah, the set was known for being unsafe. Okay, Beverly says prior Zama says she teaches math. For some reason, I thought she said she also like teaches and goes to school, but I may have just totally crossed wires there. Okay, so Azam's teaching her math class here. That's awesome. Hello to Azam's math class. Yeah, Troy, I do some polls. Sometimes I'm on my own tonight though, so I can't do it as I'm here on as well. But we have done polls in other videos. Mo said hi, Azam's class. All right. So this is kind of going to be the outro, but I will. Yeah, Maria said Troy Peter does 2 polls. Troy's awesome. Troy, I think he might be newer to the channel, which is awesome. We're happy he's here. We do polls sometimes. I'm not able to do it tonight. Yeah, thank you, Troy. He's been awesome always. He's encouraging and has good questions and is involved in the video, so it's awesome. Okay, here we go. So Eliza said, whoops, I just lost it. Eliza said Runkle also had an unexpected armor who has a sight, and he said this set was totally unsafe. All right. So thank you guys all for coming out. It wasn't quite last minute, but a couple hours notice, and you all showed up. You made it fun as always, and just always interesting to have your questions and your insight onto this. You add so much to the conversation, so I appreciate that. This case is not over. It's far from over. They haven't closed the door on criminal charges, and the civil cases are just getting started. We're starting to understand how experts might look at this case. I'm positive we're going to have differing expert reports. So it is going to be interesting, and it's probably going to be a long ride, but I appreciate all of you guys jumping in here. Hit that like button on the way out and subscribe to the page, because I'd love to have you all back for another video. Thank you.